get it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker, and joining me today is a very special guest. He's a man that holds a 16-0 record with 11 KOs. He's currently ranked number 8 by the WBA, number 14 by the WBC at the junior middleweight division. That's Andreas Katzourakis. Andreas, appreciate you taking time to come on today, man.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's get into this very first portion now. You're just a couple weeks removed now from a massive performance, a 7th-round KO of Roberto Cruz. Now that you've probably watched back on the film, you've seen the fight, what's your thoughts on that performance overall?
I really like the performance. I really enjoyed the fight in general. I knew what I was doing the first rounds, like getting a little slower, getting a sense of what he has to offer in the fight. If I can say boxing a little more, working the jab and on the outside. And, once we got over the second round, it was game over for me. I started working, I started applying pressure, and I had already finished the fight in my mind.
When we look back at that fight, you've coming off of a great win streak. You've never lost in your career, and you had a great performance. Obviously, coming out of the 154 tournament champion, you had a great run. But I feel like this performance was a statement performance. Obviously, those other fights were great. You had great performance against Brandon Adams and so on and so forth. But this is one of those things that you could say is a signature win for yourself. One of those moments that's kind of like, okay, he's official. He's a legitimate top 50 guy. He's ready to go move up to those top guys now. Would you say it's an accurate statement? Like, do you feel like that was a statement win that you wanted to make there?
100%, because coming out of the tournament, yes, I beat a couple of guys that were ranked and highly ranked on Kudratil Abdukakorov and Brandon Adams, but I didn't stop any of the two, and I didn't stop Robert Terry, which I really wanted. So I thought like I had to get a stoppage. Like no matter what, in my mind, I had to get a stoppage. Of course, I didn't let it blindside me or like go straight for it.
Right.
But I knew that throughout the fight and later on, because he didn't have the experience that I had on the later rounds, I would definitely pursue it. So I think in general, stopping this guy, an unbeaten guy that's never lost, plus the performance overall, it was a great performance and a statement.
If you were to look back at the performance, what's the biggest thing that you learned from it? Like I said, obviously it was a great performance. You had a great performance. You were even leading on the scorecard before the KO. Then you finished up on top of the KO. But I feel like it's always something you could learn from your performance. Is there something that you look back at and you say, you know what, this is something I really want to improve on heading forward now?
One thing that I definitely want to improve on is because I have a great tank, I have a great engine, I have very good endurance, and I know that I can keep the same pace from the beginning to the end. When I'm on my fights, I usually climb every round to a better pace. I think I have to start very fast from the beginning. That's one thing that I have to work on more on sparring as well, because sparring sessions can be hard, but usually you go gradually into them, and that's one thing that I have to change. Just go straight to work from the beginning.
That is a unique thing because for so many people, they either go out of the gate firing and obviously slow down the later rounds. But for yourself, it kind of seems a little bit confusing for some people that just watch and hear that, because 12 rounds of getting punched, going through a fight, and you get better as the fights go on. You get more and more active as the fights go on. How are you able to do that?
I feel there are a couple of reasons. People tend to believe that it's only because I have great endurance and great capabilities on like working on the later rounds. But in my mind, it's also because I'm breaking down the opponent. People don't tend to see it that much because I'm more of a straightforward and pressure fighter. But in my eyes and how I watch the fight from the beginning is like I'm breaking him down not only physically but strategically as well. Where he jabs, when I find the openings and everything else, and everything opens up after some rounds. And the more things I see, I can, because I have the endurance, I can take care of as well.
At what
take
point
advantage of them.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, at what point in the Roberto Cruz fight do you feel like you knew you had him set? Like you knew, okay, this fight's in my hands. I can go for the KO. I'm gonna get him out of here. When did you feel like that was official for yourself?
Yeah, so it was definitely official after the third round. Okay. On the third round, when I sat on the stool and looked in his face across the ring, it was done in my mind. But during the second round, when you can see that he clipped me with the right hand, I was off balance at that point, and he thought that he clipped me, so he started throwing wildly. So he threw like 10, 15 punches, on my mind, I was just keeping my hands up, letting him throw, and I'm like, oh, you're done after that, buddy, because I know he's never been the distance, he doesn't have the experience. I'm like, he gave too much too early.
You said something really unique there, and I don't know how many people think about that component, but obviously we look at the fighting component, but you talk about the fact that you looked across the ring in the middle of the intermission between the two rounds, and you said, okay, you looked at his face, you looked at the way he was sitting there, and you could say, okay, I think I got this guy in the victory. I got this guy in the bag now.
Yeah.
What about that? And when do you look at that? Like, how often are you looking at your opponent's expressions, the way his body language is, to determine where he's at from a mental and physical standpoint?
So I'll tell you one thing before I answering your question.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people ask me, what's my favorite thing on a fight? My favorite thing on a fight is when I see my opponent breaking down on his face. So I tend to look in general, not only, of course, during the rounds, but every time when we sit on the corner, the moment that we're sitting, because after we sit, I'm watching on my coach. I don't care about the opponent. But the moment we sit on the stool, I always take a look across, to see how he's gonna sit, like how he acts.
Mm,
So it's every round. And with him, I
okay.
told you like 3 rounds done. On the sixth round, if you sit during the time, the moment I sit on the stool, I ask my coach how many more rounds we have. The reason I asked him is because I know I'm stopping him. I'm like, how much time I have to stop him. It's not for endurance reasons. It's just to know
Right.
how much time I have.
Absolutely. Man, well, I want to get into your story because you have quite the journey to get to this point before where, for those that don't know you, you had a
Yeah,
kickboxing background. I want to get into your journey because now
yeah,
you are a top 15 ranked person in the junior middleweight division. You become a top contender, but you obviously have had a long journey to get to this point. So I want people to get to know you. First and foremost, as I said, you're not from America, you're from Greece. I know you represent that country very
yeah.
proudly. What was it like growing up out there?
It was beautiful. Greece is a beautiful place. Growing up there, it was amazing, to be honest. I was
Mhm.
an athlete since I was a kid. Since 4 years old, I got into the gym. So Uh, from the beginning, I was dedicated to what I was doing, even though I didn't know that I would become a professional athlete. Because growing up in Greece, you don't have this vision in those sports. The only way you're gonna have a vision to become a professional athlete is if you're in soccer or basketball. Nothing else. There is no more professional sports in Greece. Uh,
Okay.
but growing into it, fighting European championships, world championships, internationally, and everything else, piling up experience. Then I started looking at myself like that's what I want to do.
Mhm.
So it was a very beautiful feeling, but very hard to transition because, as I said, there are no opportunities, and not only there were no opportunities, there was not a certain road or some links that
Okay.
can get you easier to the United States. And plus, we don't have a huge amateur system as well in boxing.
Okay.
And I didn't have a huge amateur career in boxing. So, managers from here or from different parts of the world could see me and know who I am. So that was definitely a struggle, and that's a struggle for other kids with great talent back home.
All right, so a few things I want to break down that you just talked about. One of which is obviously transitioning from kickboxing to boxing. There are similarities. Obviously, there's components you can kind of translate. Was that transition easy for yourself? Did it kind of come naturally? Was it difficult? Or what was the transition from kickboxing to boxing like for yourself?
It was fairly easy, to be honest.
Okay.
The moment I decided not to throw a kick again in my life, I had no problem whatsoever with it.
Okay.
I think, to be honest, I think the moment I said, like, boxing it is, I never trained a single day kickboxing again in my life, even though it was 11 years of my life before that.
Yeah.
I never did it again. So it was fairly easy on that aspect. But I think it came easy on me in terms of stylistically fighting in boxing because, kickboxers are more straightforward, not moving so much and everything else.
Right.
But because I had a background and started with point fighting, which is sideways, kind of like, I don't know if
Hmm.
I can say taekwondo or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah. I
where
know
you
what you
have
mean.
more
Yeah.
movement. Yes, more movement and good feel of a distance and everything else. I think that helped a lot.
Okay. Obviously, for yourself, like you said, you could have been good at kickboxing. I mean, you went out there and you made hundreds of amateur bouts. You had a great career overall for obviously a youth amateur career out there. In the back of your mind, let's hypothetically say, obviously, you're boxing 100%. You're not going to go back to kickboxing. But if for some
Yeah.
reason the opportunity presented itself and you decide to go back to kickboxing, do you feel like you could make an easy transition back over there if you so wanted to?
In terms of first of all, let's be honest. I don't feel like there is any chance there might be an opportunity in kickboxing that's gonna be
Right.
bigger than boxing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not only as a magnitude, but also economically. Uh,
Hmm.
but I feel like if it was, so hypothetically speaking, I
Yeah.
don't think it would be too hard for me to transition back into kickboxing. I feel
Okay.
it would be fairly easy. Like with a couple months of training, I would be able to not get back to where I was, but definitely get a great feel of it.
Okay. Now, as you talk about though, being in Greece is not a country that's known for combat sports to the extent that it is, where you have an easy route to go become a pro. That had to be difficult. You talk about that component there. So when for you did you realize that, you know what, I have a chance at becoming a professional boxer, not just a professional boxer, but something that can become a top contender, maybe even a world champion in the future? When did those realities start to come to fruition for yourself?
I had this belief on myself from the beginning,
Okay.
but I, I never was, I never was arrogant or stupid about it. Meaning, I didn't have the skills and I was thinking too much of myself.
Okay.
I was always taking it one step at a time, and thinking that I have to prove myself every step in terms of move forward. And I think I started feeling that I can be a professional and pursuing it 15, 16 years old. I started really feeling that I can do it.
Okay.
And once it was a coach in Greece, an MMA coach, by the way,
Okay.
which he had her out to the United States because he had brought some of his fighters here. And that's the one that, implanted this little seed in my mind that, you can get out of you have to get out of Greece. You have to go to the United States. That's where you have to pursue your dreams. And we went together on my first trip. And, everything else is history. I stayed here and I started climbing the ranks. I started proving to myself and to my family, most of all, because they wanted me back in Greece to continue my studies. Uh, that I belong and I can do it.
That's obviously you just say those words and makes it sound a little bit easy, but still, you're moving from another portion of the entire world. You're transporting yourself from obviously where you grew up, your entire childhood, your family, all the
Yeah,
way to a new foreign country where at the moment, I'm not sure now, maybe you were fluent in English, maybe not, but you had to come to an entirely new country, be a part of a new language, new culture, so on and so forth. And you were, I think it was 20ish years old or something, right around there when you ended up coming over.
yeah.
How was that transition just adapting to not even the boxing, not even the component of actually pursuing what you want to, just the lifestyle?
Yeah.
How was that transition?
It was very hard. So the lifestyle of being a professional fighter wasn't the thing that was harder for me because I've been a very disciplined, dedicated person. So
Hmm.
being on point with training and everything else was easy.
Okay.
But the fact that you leave your home behind, family, friends, my girlfriend
Yeah.
at the time, and everything else, that was a very very tough part. Uh, Psychologically more than anything else. And the fact that you knew that you could see your family and everyone else only once a year, because once a year I was going back, and it
Okay.
was tough for them to come here and visit me. That was very tough and very cruel. And the fact that I had some difficulties in my career in the beginning with my management. Then I went to Big Bear, and after a year, Abel Sanchez retired. I had to move again, and all these things happened at the beginning of my career, which I didn't have money, I didn't have a home here, I didn't have something solid. So
Right.
I was kind of on the move. It was tough, but everything happened for a reason. That's my thinking. I think the harder the journey, the more sweet it is at the end.
I love that quote. I want to also ask you about that aspect where you just talked about there that overall you're going through so many ups and downs. It was chaotic beginning portion of your career. You didn't have the stability like you talked about you probably have now. Were there any difficult
Yeah.
points that when you were going through this journey that you started almost looking in the back of your mind saying, you know what, is this what I'm meant to be doing right now? Am I supposed to continue pursuing this? Like, did that ever cross your mind?
Never, to be
Okay.
honest. The only period of time that I thought it would be somewhat challenging to continue was after I split with my first management. Then I went back home for 4 to 6 months.
Mm,
We were going through a process to break the contract, and throughout this process, I thought I was done because
mm,
it was very tough to handle this situation. I've never been in a situation like that before.
all right.
But thankfully, everything turned out to be good.
As you were going through this point, when did you start to feel like you saw the light at the end of the tunnel? Obviously, I know you still have so many more aspirations, so many more goals, but you started feeling like, you know what? I kind of see the light. I see where I can start pursuing this. I see that there's going to be stability coming in the near future. When did that start to feel like you felt you're more comfortable or more stable now in life?
When I moved to Houston and started working with Ron Shields,
Okay.
that's when it happened. Because at the same time, too many things fell into place. Even
Okay.
when I was in Big Bear training with Abel Sanchez, and I'm saying those two names because those are the two biggest coaches I've ever worked with.
Hmm.
And you can tell me, some people might say, how didn't this happen when you were in Big Bear? Because in Big Bear, I was still living on a mountain, still living in camp, because I didn't have a house and I didn't have money to rent anything or, go back and forth. I was staying full time there. I was 11 months on the mountain, and sometimes I was alone up there doing nothing.
Mm,
So I didn't have the stability. Moving to Houston and being with Ronnie at the same time, we got a small deal going with a local promotion. So I started getting more active and getting more fights. And a year later, my girlfriend moved with me, which was huge, huge for
Right.
me. Psychological support and everything else. So when this happened, everything else started becoming normal. I started having a normal real life in America. Before that, I never had a real life. It was kind of weird.
You talk about Ronnie Shields. Obviously, he's a respected, incredible trainer. He's one of the best out there today. Walk us through your guys' relationship. How good has it been just having him in your life now?
I mean, it's been amazing. As I said before, Ronnie is a huge part. Uh, he played a very big role on me feeling comfortable right now where I'm at.
Mm,
Uh, First of all, he inspires great motivation through me. Knowing that I have a person like him in my corner, it's a relief. Knowing that I have someone that has been there, has done it multiple times on
right.
stages, on stages way bigger than I will ever fight. It's amazing. It's amazing. And when I got with him, I feel like working with coaches like Ronnie Shields is also a stamp of approval to
Mm.
talk with other people and work with other people. And it's just a beautiful feeling. I feel like we connected very good because, as I said, I'm a very dedicated person and disciplined. And Ronnie is not a babysitter; he's a boxing coach, so he will not be pressuring you all the time about what you're eating, what you're doing. Are you working out other than boxing? Are you running? Are you on weight? He's not this kind of person. He's a boxing coach. He's not your babysitter. Like, we're adults, we're professional athletes. We have to be able to do this for ourselves. And I do it. I do it on my own, and that fits perfectly with him.
When would you say you guys clicked? Obviously, that was pretty early on, but was there a certain moment that you felt like, okay, this is the right coach for me. This is the right person that's going to push me to the next level?
I knew it kind of from the beginning, knowing his background and everything else. I knew that he can get
Right.
me from point A to point B, but not to point B, to point C, D, E. I mean, all the
Yeah,
way to
right.
the end. But working with him from the beginning, him holding me pads and how well we clicked from the first time we worked together, and giving me advices throughout the fights and everything else. I feel like every time we work together for a fight, I learn more and more. And I feel like it's endless. You can never be perfect, and I can never get too much information from a guy that has worked with legends and has worked with so many world champions and has been in so many situations. So every time that something different presents, he know what it is because he lived it before, he done it before, and it's amazing having a coach like that in your corner.
If I had to ask you the biggest lesson that you've learned from Ronnie Shields, what would that be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know, honestly. I feel like one of the biggest lessons was, yeah, it was the first time that I came here, and I was supposed to spar Jamal, and I worked with contenders before, but I've never worked with world champion. I worked with Sebastian Fundora, but he wasn't a world champion at the time,
Right.
and we were at the gym together with Benavides for some time in Big Bear, but we didn't work together. I mean, spar.
Right.
And when we were about to spar, I wasn't nervous or anything, but Ronnie came and told me a couple of days before the spar, and he said, "You belong." He said, "You belong, and when you spar Jamal, you're gonna figure it out for yourself. That
Mm.
there is nothing that you are missing. You are here for a reason, and you will soon find out." And that was very inspiring. And literally, like, once we're done sparring, I'm like, he was absolutely right. I have, there is nothing that I'm missing. We have all the tools, and on forward.
Would you say that moment when you were sparring in Charlotte that was the kind of moment that, okay, this is my opportunity and I feel like I'm ready to go. I can compete with the best of them?
Yes, that was another solidifying moment. It was one more of those steps that I told you before. That I proved to myself that, okay, Jamal is established world champion. He's been there for a long time. He's a very technical and nice guy.
Hmm.
And when we worked together, and it was very good work. I figured afterwards that, okay, we're here for a reason. And not only that, he told me, everyone else told me around. So it was definitely a nice experience and good for my psychology as well.
What would you say, though, has been your favorite or your funniest memory with Ronnie Shields?
I think it has to be one of the we've had plenty of them, but
Mhm.
celebrating probably I have to remember which fight was it. It was my second fight in Atlanta with Overtime, not the first one.
Okay.
So probably it was after the Robert Terry win.
Okay.
One of my sponsors, my sponsor, my main sponsor in Atlanta, he has some restaurants there, Marietta Diner. A quick shout out. He held a after fight party for me, and it was the first time seeing Ronnie on the party, like really having fun,
Mm.
not in the gym, not in fights, and we just had an amazing time. There were Greek songs, and we had a great company. It was a very fun moment.
What's the difference between trainers and coaches? Because obviously, for the most people, the public, the media, we don't get to see trainers and coaches outside of the boxing ring. We see them when they're training, we see them
Yeah.
out when they're fighters, and obviously, it's a much different mindset. They flip that switch. What is a guy like Ronnie Shields like when they step outside of the ring, get away from boxing, and just enjoying life?
It's he's just a normal down to earth guy. You
Okay.
would think, or some people would think that Ronnie Steele's being where he is, trained all these guys that he has all his experiences. You would think that he would be a little arrogant, a little cocky. I don't know. Some people would be. But Ronnie's
Right.
just an extremely down to earth, humble, amazing guy, super approachable, and if you get him on a good streak, he will start saying stories and he will not stop. It's great.
That's awesome, man. Well, I got a couple of things I want to get up to you about before we get into your future plans. One of which is we kind of going back to the transition point from you coming from Greece to America, and obviously there's a little bit of language barrier I have to imagine that you overcame, and you were able to learn English as well. Was that an easy adjustment for you? Did you pick up on English really easily, or how did that come for you?
It wasn't too hard because in Greece, English is like a second language to us. We learn through the
Right.
school. So some people will pay more attention than others. I had to
Yeah.
pay attention because afterwards I went to study in the American College of Greece. So my English were pretty fluent, not even close to where they are now.
Sure.
But I was on a great stage before I came to America, so it wasn't too hard to navigate the language barrier,
Okay,
thankfully.
that's good. Now, obviously, the big thing for you is you join the OTX tournament and you end up building yourself up to where you obviously become the champion of the 154 tournament. And we know where it's obviously put you in position to be at today. But when you talk about overtime, was that something that how did that opportunity come? Where did that opportunity come from? And how did you emerge and be able to get this opportunity to go out there and fight in the tournament?
I think the opportunity came through Splitty, through my management, because in
Okay.
the first shows that over them did, if not mistaken, Splitty was a big fact. They helped them a lot
Yeah.
with matchmaking and everything else. So they put me on one of their first cards. They did 4 shows in August, the first year I think 2 years ago,
Hmm.
and I had a great performance against Rafael Gbokwe, who he had. I don't remember the record. I think it was 16-5 at the time, and one fight before me, he won the distance with Madrimov, and I
Hmm.
stopped him on the 8th round. So after this performance, because I told them exactly what I'm gonna do, they were very happy and very excited working with me as well. They gave me the opportunity to go on the tournament, or they asked me beforehand. They said, "Would you be interested on like?" I guess they were doing a gallop on like fighting a tournament on
Okay.
freestyle, or doing something like a TUF or contender series that they
Hmm.
were doing on the house and everything else.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not going to any houses. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave Ronnie Shields. I want to leave my girls. Just moved to the United States, so I'm not doing that. I don't know if it played any part on them doing the tournament and not the house, but I was very happy that they didn't.
Hmm.
And that's how the opportunity presented itself. And when they told me everything about the tournament, I was super excited because that's one thing that I didn't have at the time. I didn't have those big fights that I really wanted. And
Right.
on the tournament, you had to sign that basically you could fight whoever from not only those guys, but let's say on the final, Brandon Adams got injured.
Right.
They could bring whoever they wanted. And
Okay.
mind you, the price at the end plus the bonus, it was a very good pair. They could have brought probably anyone.
Yeah.
Uh, so you had to sign that you're okay with it, and I was totally fine with it, and the rest is history.
That obviously was, like you said, a very interesting outcome because you talk about a tournament, like you said, there's a lot of things that you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, it's up in the air.
Yeah.
Now we know what came to fruition. You end up having an incredible, exceptional run, you become the champion, so on and so forth. But what was that experience overall like where you are in a tournament? You don't get to see that too often in boxing. What was that experience like for yourself?
it was a great experience because I was super active. I mean, that year I was more active than I've ever been in my life, from the
Right.
beginning to the end. I did in 13 months, I did 5 fights. And
Mm-hmm.
in tournament, I think on 6 months span, I did 3 fights, three tough 10 rounders, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Thankfully, I didn't have no major injuries, but I had plenty of injuries during those fights. So
Mm.
I needed some rest afterwards. That was the only downside, that I needed
Right.
some rest afterwards. But other than that, it was just a beautiful feeling, going through the motion, camp after camp, uh,
Mhm.
fighting nice opposition, having Overtime promoting it, which did an amazing job. It was just an amazing experience. Plus, the only time that I had fought on TV before with the Zone was on my first Overtime fight with them a year before,
Yeah.
which was the co-main from the track Vlad Hernandez card, and being also headlining two of those cards,
Mm-hmm.
one with Cudratillo here on my current home in Houston, and one with Adams. An amazing, surreal feeling for me.
All right, so I have to ask you the other opponent about staying active because that's such a key point for so many boxers. Obviously, you
Yeah,
get to a certain level and you talk about a guy like, okay, if you're once you're in your late 30s or whatever, and you're in your final tail line, like a Bud Crawford, someone like fighting once a year or something is more manageable. But when you're working
yeah,
your way up, activity is such a hard thing to do, but it's such a critical component. And you, like you said, for the
yeah.
first time, you got that extreme activity where you were able to stay consistent fighting. How beneficial is that for a boxer? Specifically, obviously, you can attest to your own story. How critical is that for yourself?
I think it's super beneficial, and it's a great thing to do because not only it keeps you motivated and keeps you in the gym, where some people need to be kept on the gym.
Mm.
Uh, it's what we do. It's what we do.
Right.
And since at the beginning of your career, because the tournament were tough fights, but in the beginning of your career, you're not gonna have as tough of fights. So that's the time to be super active, pile up experience, get some rounds, and move forward faster as well. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when you're fighting 10 rounders and tough 10 rounders, I wouldn't mind getting an extra month in between. To
Mm-hmm.
be to be super honest, but even with just 10 weeks, I was fine with it. I was fine. And at the end of the day, we're professionals. We have experience. You can work through some minor injuries. I mean, I don't feel there are too many guys on the upper level that are going on fights with zero injuries. It's almost
Right.
impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Something will happen during the camp. An injury, sickness, something will happen during the camp.
Right.
So being able to navigate through that, I think it's great. It's only beneficial to be active.
So last thing I want to get into before we talk about your future plans is Brand Adams' fight. That's the championship fight. Obviously, a great performance. He's another guy that's still ranked in the top 15. That's a big signature win for yourself as well. When you talk about that fight overall, top to bottom, how do you feel like you performed in that fight?
I feel I performed amazing, to be honest.
Right.
I executed, because the reason I say it is because I executed the game plan exactly the way we had it.
Right.
So Ronnie told me to stay on his chest from the beginning to the end, and that's exactly what I did. He permitted me to do it as easily as I did because I put him on the ropes and he couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
And you know, that's done. Like 6 rounds in my mind, I've already won the fight. I can lose the last four and I've already won,
Right.
because it was so easy for me to get him there and keep him there and just stay active and do my thing. And
Wait.
it was a great experience at the end of the day, because Adams was, other than Kudratillo, my most accomplished opponent. He had knocked out Bohatsuk some fights ago.
Yep.
It was on his more active year in his career, where he had stopped a tough opponent on. Oh my God, I'm terrible. What's the name of the first guy that he stopped?
I'm trying to remember too. I forgot. I forgot exactly who it was, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He
Yeah.
fought Callum Walsh too.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I know who he is. Villarreal.
Yep.
He started Villarreal on the third round, and then he fought Verona and he had a nice performance. Close fight, but nice performance. And coming after those two big wins, he just couldn't do anything with me.
When you look at your career, what is the best performance? Like, if you were to say, this is the fight that I think has been my best performance, would that be the most statement win, the best performance? What fight would that be?
I think the most statement win from everything was the Adams fight.
Right.
Uh, Performance-wise, I might go with the last one, but
Yeah.
the level of the opponent was a little lower because he wasn't as technical and he wasn't as experienced.
Sure.
But I was very happy with my performance with the Kudratila Abdugakorov too, because he was a high caliber fighter with a kind of awkward style, and he came, in my opinion, the best he ever looked, because I was looking clip of him before, and he was nothing like that on my
Agree.
fight. And my performance with him, I showed a different Andreas as well. I moved a lot, I feinted, I did different stuff, so I boxed more. But the thing that I would change a lot on this performance was to just be a lot more active. I feel like if I was a lot more active from the beginning to the end, maybe I
Right.
could have even gotten the stoppage.
Well, that perfectly leads us into what I want to get into next. Let's talk about your future plans. And you just talked about, okay, your two most recent fights are two of your best statement wins of your career. You feel like those are two of your better performances. So that leads me obviously to the next point. What can we expect from you going forward now? What's next for yourself, and how special? What's the ceiling for Andreas Katz?
So honestly, whenever I get this question lately, because now we are, as you said, number 8 in the WBA, 14 in the
Right.
WBC. So we are top 10 in the world right now. So I
Mhm.
can't fight for a world title if I get the opportunity, because you have to be, I think, top 10 or top 15 to do that. Uh, World title is what I want,
Okay.
100%. And I think I have proved myself already through my last fights to be able to get it. So, of course, anyone with a belt, it's the first thing that I want. But I just want to keep climbing up the ranks. If I'm not able to get a world title opportunity, just to get another strong opponent, be able to keep climbing until we get it. And I don't think there is a roof. I don't think there is a ceiling. I think I just keep growing and growing. And I hope I become world champion at 154 by the end of, I would say 2025, but I don't see it happen 2025, because I think I'm gonna get one more fight this year by the end of 2026. So 100%, and then even moving to 160. I think
Okay.
I'm, my size is pretty good for 160 as well. So we'll see.
Well, I have to follow up around that point you just made there. You said 160 could be in your future. Is it more so in the back of your mind saying, I want to accomplish what I want to accomplish at 154? I want to become world champion. And if all those goals get reached, then I'll move to 160? Or is 160 something you're considering moving up to regardless of what happens at 154?
No, no, I want to become world champion at 154 first.
Okay.
That's
Gotcha.
certain. That's my division. That's where I belong. I want to do it.
Okay.
But being 27, not being extremely easy to go to 154. It's fairly easy with
Sure.
with my weight cut and working with the nutritionists that I'm working with. But you know, I see myself being 160, no problem. And I think like I'm 27 right now. By 30 years old, I might move up.
Okay, gotcha. Well, the cool thing is about 154, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best weight class in boxing right now. And from both a standpoint of obviously if you star people, and then you look at just the depth. There's so many guys. When you talk about this contending list, these are guys, just some names to throw out that's in your either the WBC, WBA rankings in front of you or behind you. Israel Madrimov, Jesus Ramos, Abbas Baruch, Charles Conwell, Josh Kelly, Callum Walsh, Sergey Boachuk. These are guys that are not even world champions right now. These are just guys that are top
Yes,
contenders.
yes.
And so when you look at that component, how excited is that for you when you say, you know what, I can still get some elite level competition to go out there and fight, even if it's not for world champion next?
It's amazing. It's amazing
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, that's what you want to do. You want to be on a stacked division. The more stacked the division is, the more attention you're gonna get, the more
Yep.
money you're gonna get eventually. And I feel like I'm lucky to be in a division that's stacked, because at the beginning of my career I was at 160, and 160 was a pretty stacked division, and
Yep.
154 was pretty empty. And I moved down to 154. 154 is stacked right now,
Yep.
and we can see that Butch wants to move up to 154.
Yep.
I think we might lose Crawford from 154, moving
Agreed.
up and fighting Canelo. I think he's going to retire afterwards.
Hmm.
But even losing Crawford for 154, I don't think it's going to be a big blow, because
Agreed.
it's so stacked of a division, and with youth, with a lot of young guys, not older guys that seem to be able to retire, to not be able to move through retirement. Uh, so I think we're at a great division, at a great point in boxing right now for our division as well.
All right. Well, the floor is yours. I have to ask you. We just talked about this great division, stacked, tons of great oppositions. Obviously, like you said, you want the world title shot. Will that happen 2025? Possibly, maybe not. Obviously, 2026 more, like you just alluded to. So, if you fight another guy, another top contender this year, who do you want? Who's someone that you would like to fight?
I'm not gonna call out a name. I don't have, because I honestly don't have a name in my mind, because the
Okay.
names that I want have belts. Uh, the two people that I really want to fight, stylistically too, I think it will be great fights. Is Virgil Ortiz one, because I think that fight is gonna be an amazing fight,
Yeah.
and Xander Zayas, because Xander Zayas is another up and coming contender. I know he's gonna fight for the WBO right now, so
Yep.
you know he's gonna have, probably and hopefully he's gonna have a belt very soon as well. So one of those two guys is definitely a goal for me in the future.
All right, so I don't know exactly. I believe this interview came right before your previous fight, but in one of them you said you hope to fight again in July. You're going to get married, which congratulations on that component as well. Then in the later
Thank you,
summer,
thank you.
early fall, and then you said you would want to return to the ring in December. Is that still the plans for you? Has that changed a little bit, or where do you stand in terms of how many times we could see you fight by the end of this year?
It changed a little bit. July is out the window. July
Okay,
is out the,
gotcha.
because we figured out, yeah, we figured out that we're gonna have to do some more preparation, everything else for the wedding. And at the end of the day, you're getting married only one time in your life. At least that's what I'm
Exactly. Yep.
planning to do. So,
Yeah.
we want to enjoy the process. I want to be able to enjoy the process because having a fight,
Definitely.
I'm not gonna enjoy the process. Uh, so yeah, we're looking for something after the wedding. So probably fall. That's what we're looking at.
Well, first of all, I said congratulations on that component then for getting able to get married, and
Thank you.
hopefully you do enjoy that time. Now,
Thank you.
on
Thank you.
the
Thank
other,
you.
absolutely, man. Well, obviously, then, so you said, so we could see you then most likely, would you say late fall, winter time? Is that kind of what you're going to kind of game plan somewhere probably between, October to December time span then?
That's what we're thinking. That's what we're thinking. We don't have a certain plan, so I can't really say anything.
Yeah, definitely.
But I know that many things, many things are moving in boxing right now, which is great for the sport. And
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have something pretty solid by the end of the summer. We're gonna have something pretty solid.
All right. So if you were to have your next 12 to 18 months planned out for yourself, whether that be how many fights you're going to fight, where you see yourself, what is the goal for yourself? Like if I were to talk to you again, like I said, 12 to 18 months, where do you see yourself in life as a world champion, unified champion at 160? Like where do you see yourself in 12 to 18 months?
World champion at 154.
Okay.
Uh, thinking that thinking that probably I'm not gonna be able to get the world title shot by the end of the year, which I think I'm gonna have only one fight by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say the first fight of 2026 is for a world title, me
Okay.
winning the world title. So by the end of 2026, if I can have one or two more fights, depending on when the first one gonna happen,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I see myself as unified because if you have the world title and you have two more fights, you might as well unify the division. But definitely staying at 154 and hopefully being a world champion.
Now you are ranked the highest in the WBA. If you were to pick one of the different organizing bodies, would the WBA be the one you're kind of targeting to become the world champion? And does it not really matter to you, or how do you approach that component?
I would love to be the WBA because those are the ones that I started working with and they
Yeah.
have me ranked the highest. Yes, we are on WBC, but being honest, I didn't like the fact that I won Brandon Adams and I had him higher than me on the rankings. I don't know how that works.
I was going to point that out. Yep.
So yes, WBA is the one that I'm looking forward to competing for. But any of the organizations, I don't care which organization it is. I just want to get a belt.
I love that, man. Well, Andreas, I got one final question for you. It's the question like wrapping up every single interview with, and it's talking about your legacy. You have an incredible story, but you're only 27 years old, so I know you still got many more years in the tank for yourself. But when that day does come, you decide to step away from boxing, you move on from the sport, put the gloves down. What is it that you want Cass to be remembered for what you've accomplished both inside the ring and outside of it?
Inside the ring, I want to be remembered to be the first Greek world champion of the modern era. We only had
Okay.
one world champion before, and he was on 1939 to 1941, which
Mm-hmm.
is crazy. That was almost 80 years ago, and it's
Yep.
only been one. Uh, Not almost 80 years ago, more than 80 years,
Yep.
85 years ago. I want to be remembered as the first Greek world champion of the modern era, and then other than that, I want to be able to the thing I told you before that wasn't easy for me to have a route to the United States and be able to to compete and make my dreams come true easily. I want to make it easier and more approachable for Greek fighters, and not
Mhm.
only moving here to be able to do it, but having the grounds to be able to start their career and
Mhm.
not only start their career, but be able to feed themselves and their families from it back home in Greece.
Man, I love that answer. Well, actually, I follow up real quickly on that component right there. You just talk about representing Greece. You talk about that you want to not only have Greece be put on the map, you want to make Greece a bigger place where people can kind of grow up and develop themselves at home
Yes,
in Greece. What does it mean to you to be able to represent your home country in Greece?
it's super important and so nice, being able to fight with my flag on my chest when I'm walking out and with the Greek colors. It's
Yeah,
just it's just an amazing feeling, Every time you represent your country, it's beautiful, and I wasn't able to do it in the Olympics, which that's the highest thing that you can do as an amateur.
right.
I hope I get the world title with a Greek flag on my back and get it back home because that's the highest thing in the sport in general.
I love that, man. Well, Katz, congratulations again on your big fight win against Roberto Cruz. Enjoy the wedding, and I appreciate you taking time to come on today once
Thank you so
again,
much.
man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate coming here and, hope to come back.
Absolutely, man. You're always welcome. Anytime you want to come on, just let me know. We can definitely set something up.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you.
No problem. Talk to you later, Katz. God
See you.
bless. I appreciate everybody for tuning into the interview. I'm going to get that clipped up and edited out so you guys can go check that out if you guys didn't see the whole thing. So you guys go check it out on my YouTube channel very shortly. I'm going to go on a quick break and we'll get back into the remainder of the show shortly. See you guys in a little bit. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker. And now, at this portion of the show, to give you guys a quick outline of how it's going to go, I'm going to be getting into a fight recap of what happened in Japan last night, this early morning, wherever you are, depending on obviously where you tuned in to watch that fight. And then I'm going to be getting into some boxing news and updates after that. So make sure to tune in. But also, for those of you that have never been on the show before, after each aligned segment, as I talk about, obviously in this case, the recap and then the fight news, I'm going to be giving a short break where you guys can go talk about whatever it is. I'll address the questions in the comment section. So make sure if there's any comments, any subjects you want me to touch up on, we can get right to it. This is kind of going to be the intermediate portion of where I'll be until I get a phone call and thing. I plan on doing that in the near future. But for the time being, I don't have the phone call option. So we'll have comments in the comment section. Make sure to leave those there. I'll address those after each planned segment. So let's get into what happened last night in Japan. Let me just say this first and foremost. That card was sensational. And I get it. For a lot of people, specifically in America, waking up in the crack of dawn is not always easy. But man, are those Japan cards always fun to watch. And listen, last night did not disappoint. It was an incredible card, fun to watch. Now, I will say this about broadcasting side, or aside from that portion, the broadcast was a little bit odd. I do not know why there was no time or names or anything on the bottom, so you never knew how much time was left in the fight, or the round, I should say. That was a little bit confusing. But besides that, the performance from the fighters was incredible. So I'm going to break that down right now. We're going to go up from the portions that are covered on DAZN first, and then we'll work our way up to the main event. First and foremost on the card on DAZN's broadcast, we had Nari versus Hara, and this was the Japanese super featherweight title. That was a solid fight. And what I'll say about this to begin with is for Nari, he was a guy that obviously has risen to a standard where obviously people have looked at him as, okay, this is a guy that has a bright future, obviously still working his way up. Some would say he was gifted a decision his last fight. And then obviously the first version of the Hara fight was not a very good performance overall. He could have done much better. I feel like last night he finally let himself go to the point where this was a statement win. This was the win that we were waiting for him to go have. Is he anywhere near world title contention or anything along those lines? No, it's still going to be a little bit while until he works his way up there. I'd say probably roughly, let's say 2 or 3 more fights going to need. But he got that belt, defended his Japanese super featherweight title. It was a good performance, got the KO in the 8th round. I feel like that was the performance we've all been waiting for. This was the statement type of win that we wanted to have him fight. It was a good performance from him overall. Like I said, still, there's flaws. He's going to have to work his way up. Still has a few more fights to his actually going to be fighting at that world stage level. But overall, I was very satisfied with what I saw. I feel like it was a great performance. His best performance in a little bit of time, I'd say. And so I was very, very emphatic about that situation for himself. I think he was great. Now, for Hara, obviously, he could go have his bounce back fight. He could obviously move on from boxing. I'm not sure what exactly he's going to have in store for us, but that was a good-ish performance. I don't think he's ever going to reach the world level. So if he wants to stay domestically fighting in Japan, obviously he could do so, but he's going to have to rebuild himself back up. For Nari, he's going to have to be able to go. And so like I said, 2 or 3 more fights, and then he'll be ready for that world stage. A little bit of side note before I go to the co-main event, though. The Japanese belt is really cool. In my opinion, it's probably one of the coolest non-world championship fights. Obviously, when you talk about the WBC, all those type of belts, those are the top ones. But in terms of the international, continental, those type of belts, the Japanese belt's really cool. That's just my side of note opinion on that one. Let's head over to the co-main event, though. And it was interesting because when you talk about the co-main event, I personally, and I know why they didn't do it, but I personally would have thought that Eduardo Nunez and Rikiishi would have been the main event. That was the best fight on paper heading into the night. Unfortunately, because of the situation where my personal guess to why it was not the main event was because with it being in Japan, you had 2 Japanese fighters, or you had the Japan fight. Obviously, I don't know exactly, but I think Eddie Hearn getting it on DAZN, moved to the co-main event, whatever it was. Actually, I don't know anything, but it didn't make any sense. That should have been the main event. For whatever reason, it was co-main. So let's get into it though right now. Rikiishi versus Eduardo Nunez for the IBF super featherweight title. That was a good fight. And I'll be honest about this. I see your comment right now, Jesus. Rikiishi didn't let his hands go. He's a little bit disappointed in that fact. I definitely see that point there. But the news did come out following the fight that he has a shoulder injury. And that obviously had an impact. He's going to have surgery this upcoming week, I believe it came out and said. So that's something I'll address in a moment. But in that fight, Eduardo Nunez did his thing. Eduardo Nunez won. I think the one scorecard that was 115 to 113 was a little bit wild in my opinion. I don't know how the scorecards were that close. I had it a little bit wider. I think the other ones should have been a little bit wider. I think Eduardo Nunez clearly won that fight. I don't think it was much of a question when it came to the scorecards who was going to win that fight. But when I look at that fight, Eduardo Nunez did his thing. I think that when you talk about the beginning portion of the fight, Rikiishi was moving around pretty well, and he did fine in the first couple of rounds. As it progressed the fight, and you got to those final few rounds of the fight, Eduardo Nunez was in complete control. I feel like that pressure that he has, and let me just say this, The relentless pressure that Eduardo Nunez has is insane. His gas tank does not give out. He is going in consistent pursuit from the start of the fight to the end of the fight. And he has good power, but this was the very first time that a fighter has made it all 12 rounds and lost the fight against Eduardo Nunez. He's KO'd all his other fights, and all the other people he's fought and won against, he's KO'd. So props to Rikiishi in that standpoint. But I think when we talked about this fight, I said Eduardo Nunez was the heavy favorite to win this fight. It came out. That was what ended up happening. I thought it was going to be a KO. Eduardo Nunez did not get the KO, but he did confidently win that fight to become the IBF super featherweight world title holder. As I said, there was an issue with Rikiishi. Apparently, he was not able to spar for a month and a half prior to the fight. Obviously, it could have impacts. He had a shoulder injury. As you said, no. Any more excuses? That's completely fine. That's legitimate. You can't have excuses in boxing. Just putting that out there for the facts. That he did have an injury in that fight, and we'll see. Did that impact you? I don't know. But what I will say is overall, I was a little bit impressed from the standpoint that I thought Eduardo Nunez was going to be in complete control the entirety of that fight. And I feel like Rikiishi did a little bit better than I even had expected, or at least most people expected. Could he possibly have done more if there wasn't a shoulder thing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know what that answer is. But what I will say is I don't think this is the last time we're going to see Rikiishi. I feel like he went out there and he had a good enough performance where he will have an opportunity in the future to go fight again at a high level. So we'll see what ends up unfolding there. But for Eduardo Nunez, he is going to put himself in position now as a world champion to set himself up for a big fight next. Now, there's a lot of things on the table for this fight. I feel like the most easy fight to make for Eduardo Nunez next is the fight against Ray Ford. When you talk about him being promoted by Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, same thing with Ray Ford. That's the fight to make. I think that's what we're going to see have happen next. Navarrete, he's going to be almost guaranteed to have to be fighting Charlie Suarez in a rematch. You look at Oshaki Foster and Lamont Roach, they're the two champions. Both of those guys are rumoring, if not already confirmed, for fights at 135. Obviously, the rematch for Tank and Lamont Roach at 135. And Oshaki Foster seems to be wanting that fight with Shakur Stevenson or someone along those lines. So we'll see what's unfolding at that point. I don't think there's going to be unification on the table anytime soon. So the most logical fight to make is Ray Ford for Sugar Nunez. And if that fight does get made, it's going to be interesting. I think that Eduardo Nunez is a good fighter, but I'm not 100% sold on him yet. I think he has good power. I love his gas tank. I think his relentless pressure is incredible. But I'm not 100% sold that he is that guy yet. He's still young, still could go prove himself. Nothing against him. Not something that I'm going to look at him and say he's not that guy. But I still want to see a little bit more from him. I think that Ray Ford would be the perfect opportunity for him to go out there and we can really see what he's made of. Because you're talking about a guy in Ray Ford who many people believe, including myself, is going to be a future world champion at 130. That is the fight that we would like to see. And I think if we see Ray Ford, he can go out there and do his thing against Ray Ford. I feel like I'd be much more confident saying that Eduardo Nunez is that guy. But up until that point, he's a good fighter. Obviously, he's one of those guys. He's a world champion now. He deserves his credit. He deserves his flowers in those sense. But in terms of talking about, is he that guy at 130? Is he one of those top contenders? Can he hold this belt for a long time? That's to be determined, in my opinion. And Ray Ford is the right guy to make. I feel like it's just a matter of time until we get that announcement, with them both being Eddie Hearn. Get that fight by the end of the year on a Riyadh season card or something along those lines. I see that being in the future. That's what I think needs to happen. Now, for Rikiishi, as I said, he is having a surgery for a shoulder, and I think they said this upcoming week or next week. Next week on Tuesday, I think, is what the report said. So if that is the case, obviously he could be out for quite some time. We'll see when he ends up returning. But however that comes out, he's going to have to obviously get a couple of fights, rebuild himself back up into contention. My last point I want to say about this fight before I go any further is this. When we look at the table right now at 130, the fight that could have, and in my opinion should have been made, was going to be Kikase and Eduardo Nunez. I am disappointed that fight did not get made now that we look back at it. Because there's two sides to this. For Kikase, do I think he completely ducked Sugar Nunez? There could be a legitimate case for that. Financially, the Lee Wood fight did make sense. He made a good bag getting in that fight. It made sense from that standpoint. From a legacy standpoint, in the fight that most people would have rather seen, it's disappointing that fight did not get made. Because that would have been a perfect fight where if the winner, whoever won that fight, would be sitting in a position where they have a legitimate debate that they're one of, if not the best guy at 130. That's my personal opinion on that fight. I wish that we saw that fight happen. It would have been a much better fight than Kikase and Lee Wood. That never was going to be a competitive fight, in my opinion, and it went just according to script. I think that was a good financial bag for Kikase, but in terms of who was actually going to be a good legacy fight, what was the best fight to make, that was never on the table. And unfortunately, that's the route he went, and it's not going to be a fight that we get to see happen right away. As I said, Ray Ford makes the most sense. If we could get Kikase and Eduardo Nunez in the future, that would be a good fight to make. I would not be against that. I would like to see that fight happen because I feel like Kakasi is definitely in the mix there. I see your comment right there. Yes, 130 is 100% up for grabs. And I'm actually going to have a segment where I address 130 in a little bit, but 130 is 100% up for grabs right now. Navarrete has been the best guy for a little bit of time now, but obviously the Charlie Suarez fight revealed some things to us. And it obviously leaves a lot of skepticism as to if he is still that guy. Therefore, like you said, 130 is up for grabs. And so when you look at everyone in the landscape, there's a lot of guys in that mix. Which is why I say Eduardo Nunez could definitely be in that picture. But as he solidified himself, has he become that guy at 130 yet? That is to be determined. Let's go to what happened in the main event. And I'm just going to say this straight up. When we talk about this main event, all that I can really say is that Tanguy did not belong in that ring with Takai. Plain old like that. I mean, there's nothing else I can really say. That is an embarrassing thing that happened there. And listen, we sometimes get these guys that come from areas where they grow up and they have these stat pad records. And they put themselves in a position as he did to go fight for a world championship. And sometimes it does work out. So I'm not going to say it's always. Sometimes those guys do pan out and we see these great turnaround. Tatarun's a great example of that, who just did it on Saturday. Defended his belt once again. Obviously we have those situations. But last night, that was not a guy that belonged in the ring for a world championship fight. Not at all. It was not a good performance. It was embarrassing. And listen, yes, he got a nice payday, but at the end of the day, that's not even safe, we're going to be honest. There was levels to boxing, and Takai is an incredible fighter. And you stepped in the ring with him, and Takai made that very, very clear. I mean, you get dropped 3 times in the first round, and then you get stopped. In 3 minutes, it's just baffling to me that he even got the opportunity to go in that ring with him. It was not a good fight whatsoever. Takai took care of business. Major props to him. Obviously, he made a statement. He did what he had to do to defend his WBO bantamweight title. But for Tanguy, I mean, why are you in that ring? It's embarrassing that he got put in that ring. It obviously showed that there was massive levels to this thing, and he did not belong in that ring. There's nothing else to take away. Where does Tanguy go from here? I've got no clue. Throw him up wherever. He's not going to obviously be on a world title championship fight ever again. As for Takai, obviously there's lots of big fights to make. Where does he go from here? You could obviously say you have the Nishida and Katani fight happening in, what is it now, a week and a half, 2 weeks now, whatever it is. That could be the guy you could fight, either the winner or the loser of that fight. That would make perfect sense. But ultimately, a unification would make the most sense for him next. That's the route to go. I would love to see that fight. Obviously, it would have been awesome to go see the Sumi fight with him. So Sumi's going to be out for a foreseeable future now. He had to relinquish his belt because of the eye injury. So that's off the table for now. But lots of fights to make. Unification is the next step for him. He's earned it. He's ready to make the next step. I want to see him go make that jump and unify the belts at 118. With that being said, we should get everything done there. Yes. So that's what I thought. But overall, it was a great night of fighting. I absolutely loved what we witnessed last night. It was incredible fights, incredible card. Very, very exciting fight card right there. I'm going to go through the comments real quick before we head into the next portion of the show. Let's see what we got here. Rikiishi didn't let, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, yes. We don't know what happened, but at the end of the day, I will say this, Jesus. When you talk about the fact that he's going to go under the knife, he's going to have shoulder surgery, that's still something you have to credit. It's obviously something you cannot take away from him. He still deserves credit for going out there and fighting the way he did. And regardless of what it is, I'm not someone who's going to give guys excuses. Obviously, you don't want to use excuses, but when you do have injuries like that, that still is a serious injury, especially if you're going to have surgery on your shoulder. So I'm not 100% against that. And at the end of the day, I do have to give him props because he still did fight a better fight than I expected, even with if there being a shoulder injury. I already was high on him between how he performed in that fight prior to the injury. With the injury now and being knowledgeable, I feel like he's going to be a guy that's going to bounce back. He's going to be just fine. So I'm going to go on a quick commercial break again. Then I'll be back in about 2 minutes to wrap the show at Boxing News. I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the SchuZ Show. It's time to get into some boxing topics now to wrap up the show. First and foremost, in regards to Anthony Joshua, we've got an update now what is going to be coming up to him in the future now. Let me read the exact reports. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on it. Anthony Joshua still intends to return to the ring this year despite his recent elbow surgery. Eddie Hearn has confirmed. Eddie Hearn says this: he'll only fight once this year. He'll be good to go in the middle of September, and by then we will know for sure if Fury is going to return or not. But AJ's opponent will also depend on what happens in Usyk versus Dubois. I like our spot. If Wilder comes back and looks sensational, we'll probably start talking about it again. I don't rule it out. Now, to get further details, Anthony Joshua is in talks for a 2-fight Riyadh season deal. Last night, it was reported it was going to be a 3-fight deal. Eddie Hearn comes down and clarifies it's going to be a 2-fight deal for Anthony Joshua's Riyadh season. That being said, some of the names being discussed for that deal is Dillian White, Jared Anderson. I'll give my thoughts in a minute. Usyk Dubois winner, Tyson Fury, and a possible rematch behind that as possible opponents for that deal. AJ is likely to return in the final quarter of 2025 or early 2026. All right, let me give you guys my thoughts on Anthony Joshua and what's going to happen next. The last we saw of Anthony Joshua was, before we know it, in just about a couple months from now, it'll be at a year since he returned to the ring. Anthony Joshua went into that fight. He had rebuilt himself up, gets out there, and gets manhandled by Daniel Dubois. Obviously, when you get caught by a heavyweight, especially a guy like Daniel Dubois, it kind of throws out your whole game plan. That fight was over from the get-go when that got happening. AJ did have that moment where he did, I don't want to, he kind of hurt him. Obviously, I'd say more stunned. Daniel Dubois is probably the proper word there, until Daniel Dubois put the final touches and KO'd Anthony Joshua in that fight. All right, we get to this position now where Anthony Joshua has not fought in what is going to be at least a year when it ends up coming to fruition when he returns to the ring. Which leaves a lot of questions now for what's next for Anthony Joshua. Because when he got KO'd, the question already was, is Anthony Joshua going to retire? Is he going to try to go for world championships? There's a lot of questions for us. Well, at this point in time, Anthony Joshua will be at least 1 year older when he returns to the ring. Not the best of things, especially for a guy that is at his best, is when he's consistent and active, as is for most boxers. Therefore, Anthony Joshua going after this 2-fight deal makes me think a few different things. I'm going to outline my plans for Anthony Joshua. If I were to hypothetically be a matchmaker right now, and I look at what's on the table, what makes sense from what reports we have, I'm going to give you guys what I believe Anthony Joshua will be doing when he returns on this Riyadh season 2-fight deal. Let's get right to it. First and foremost, all plans revolve around the Tyson Fury fight. When you look at boxing, and you look at factoring the domestic appeal, you look at the branding, you look at the name, the image, all the different components, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury at Wembley Stadium is probably, if not the biggest fight to make in boxing currently. Sure, you can debate it with a couple other fights, but it's right in that mix. And that's why I firmly believe that the number one fight on that Riyadh season deal is going to simply be Anthony Joshua fighting Tyson Fury at Wembley Stadium. I've said that time and time again. That has to be number one. So the fight number one on that deal will be Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. I don't see any other way around that. Fury is not going to stay retired. He's done this before. He is going to be announcing his return in the near future, and we're going to get an announcement that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua will be fighting at Wembley Stadium by the end of this year, early 2026. All right? That's number one. That's what I believe will happen. I'd be shocked if that's not the case. That's the first fight on that deal. So then you ask the question then that really gets interesting. All right, 2-fight deal. What's the second fight plan for that deal? Here's my ideas on that plan. I believe that if that fight with Tyson Fury results in a controversial fight, or it results in a chance where, it's a very, very close competitive fight, I believe the second fight on that deal will be the rematch. The reason I believe that is it's going to be putting themselves in a position very similar to Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. And when that's the situation at hand, you're going to have too much of a financial gain to possibly lose out on to not make that be the rematch. I think that's the fight that's going to happen. Both these guys are past the prime. Both these guys are pretty much all but removed from world title contention. The only reason I say pretty much is because if Usyk retires, you have 4 belts open up. Could you get lucky with the right fight and go and make yourself a world champion? Possibly. It's not out of the question, but I don't think either one's going to position themselves to be in that situation going forward. So I believe that, yes, if that fight is controversial or a very competitive, high-action fight where there's a lot of appeal for a rematch, the rematch will simply overrule any other fight and become the second fight on that 2-fight deal. Let's look at the other options. If Anthony Joshua were to come out and be a big fight where he wins in a devastating fashion, I'm saying he KOs Tyson Fury. Something that's very, very difficult to do. We have not seen that really. So if that happens for Anthony Joshua, that's something that I believe would come to fruition, and he would set himself up for a fight that, while I'm not a favorite for it, I don't like it. Usyk has said that before, that if he fights and he defeats Daniel Dubois, he would be interested and want to fight the winner of AJ and Tyson Fury. Because Usyk said that, I have to throw that in there. If AJ has a devastating fight where he KOs Tyson Fury, somehow does that, I believe that there would be an opportunity for him to go fight the winner of Usyk and Dubois, specifically Usyk. And for Dubois' standpoint, once again, I'm not a favorite of this. I think Joseph Parker deserves that fight. I would be upset if Joseph Parker does not get that fight. But because of the way that the money and what AJ brings in, with Riyadh season being involved, and with what Usyk said, and the fact that Frank Warren obviously has already talked about the fact that there was a rematch deal for the AJ fight, I could see that being a case where we do see AJ, if he does win in devastating fashion, Tyson Fury, if he wins that would be on the table. If he also wins that fight in the rematch against either Usyk or Dubois is not on the table, I could see them going out there and pursuing Caballel or Joseph Parker. Those would be two of the fights that I could see happening, and I'd not be against that at all. If AJ were to lose that fight, I have two fights that I think make sense for his final deal on that Riyadh season deal, and at that point in time, it could be very well moving on. And here's what they are. Deontay Wilder or F.A. Ajagba in Nigeria. Those are the two options I have him if he loses that fight in Tyson Fury for the second fight on that Riyadh season deal. Let me explain those. Deontay Wilder is obviously, you could easily sell that fight, easily promote that fight. Casuals will be all over that fight. You're talking about two of the biggest names of this past generation in the heavyweight division. Especially if Deontay Wilder goes down, what he should do is have a devastating KO here in a couple weeks now. I think it's June 28th, July 20th, whatever it is. And Deontay Wilder has a big performance there. You could see that be something that's easily promoted. And you have Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder. While it's way past his prime, you could see that fight end up happening. Or you see AJ pretty much wrap up his career back in Nigeria, fighting a fellow Nigerian, F.A. Ajagba. That would be a cool situation for him. I think that'd be a great way to ride off from the sunset, doing it in the country that you like to represent. In Nigeria, fighting a fellow Nigerian would be a massive, massive fight card in Africa. I could see that fight being made and having come to fruition. So those are three routes I have set for this 2-fight deal with Anthony Joshua was discussing with Riyadh season. To recap it, Anthony Joshua will be fighting Tyson Fury, in my opinion. That's the first fight. And secondly, you will either have a rematch with Tyson Fury, or you will be having him go for a world title shot against Usyk Dubois or Caballel or Joseph Parker. And if he loses the fight, Deontay Wilder and F.A. Ajagba are on the table. That's why I see how Anthony Joshua finishes up his Riyadh season deal he's negotiating, and possibly even finishes up his boxing career. Let's see what you got now here. Jesus, you're talking about the fight. AJ, let's see what you got here. AJ versus Fury is 2025, get it over with. I agree. I think that fight has to happen. And at the same point, that is the fight, as I said. Is that the fight that once could have been? Absolutely not. Is Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury something that we all want to see? Is it monumental for the sport of boxing like it once could have been? Absolutely not. But is this a fight that we just need to have it happen? It makes too much sense for both guys with where they're at in their careers currently. Yes. So get it over with 2025. Make it happen. We'll see what happens. AJ versus Mosey Toma in 2026. I do like that. That actually is interesting. I was considering putting him in this list. The only thing is that I could very well see it happening, but I would be a little bit shocked if they have him fight. If Mosey Toma gets to fight with Anthony Joshua. I say this because I think Toma is going to be fighting somebody that's probably a top 15 guy that probably is not deserving to be on top 15 by one of the organization bodies. And at that point in time, he'll then fight a guy like Martin Bokolli, seems to be the guy that people are setting up right now. Maybe even a Jared Anderson, something along those lines. I don't think we're going to see Anthony Joshua be used as the test guy, if you will, to be the guy we're going to see if Toma's ready to go forward. Anthony Joshua's going to be a guy that's going to kind of set his career up, and I don't think he's going to want Mosey Toma. But would I, as a boxing fan, like to see that fight? Yes. I just don't know if they're going to make that fight happen. That's why I did not include him on my list. Fury versus AJ expiration date, who cares? I think a lot of people do care, to be honest. If I'm going to be honest about that fight, is it a fight that, for those that love the sport of boxing, is it a fight that I'm excited for as opposed to, when we're talking about a Bevel Better Beef or something at those levels? Absolutely not. That's why I always like to differentiate. There's a difference between biggest fights and best fights. Biggest fights are fights that you can get a nation or you can get a at-large group of people to be bought into. And when you're a promoter, your job is to approach those people, whether they know boxing or don't know boxing, and get them excited about that fight. And it's very easy to do that when you have Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua in a domestic scene. And that's why I think it's still one of the biggest fights to make. It's not one of the best, nowhere even near the best fights to make in boxing, but it certainly is one of the biggest fights to make in boxing. So I think specifically in the UK, we will see that happen, and that's gonna be a massive thing. But I think even people that just like boxing like I do, and I think you do as well, I feel like that's still a fight we would tune in for. It just isn't a fight that I'm going to be drastically excited for as an American especially, maybe obviously it's different for people in the UK. It's just a little bit different, but it still is a massive fight to get made. Let's see what else we have. A rematch, oh dear. Yeah, I mean, that was what was discussed. Eddie Hearn did bring that possibility up. And I think that the only reason a rematch would possibly happen in that fight, as I said, is if there is controversy and if it is a close fight. And as I said, it wouldn't necessarily be the situation that I'm going to look at and say, okay, this has to be a rematch. It's not going to be written as a rematch clause. I think it's more so going to be if a similar situation happens, like we just saw Chris Eubank, Conor Ben, where it's such a massive fight, people love the fight. It was a very entertaining fight that it would be too much money available for those guys that could not turn down. So I feel like that's the only situation we possibly get a rematch in. That's why I made sure to emphasize that. Only if these two guys have a performance where there's a massive market, where the money possibly available to them for a rematch is so large that they would turn down anything else. That's the only thing I'd possibly see that for. But regardless of Tyson Fury's last fight of his career will be Anthony Joshua. AJ versus Fury only doing it for UK and making money. Well, yeah, absolutely. I think there's no other reason that fight happens other than those two reasons I just talked about. Fury, AJ doesn't seem interested much in boxing careers, so much past the tour. Yeah. Well, that's, I think that we're looking at Anthony Joshua, the way that he's branded himself to this point in time. As I said, I just don't see him being a guy that's going to want to pursue a guy where, yeah, I mean, if we're going to be honest, Itoma, especially if he goes out there and let's say he fights a guy like Jermaine Franklin or a guy that's along those lines, one of those different guys, like I said, there's a top 15 guy, but obviously if we were to rank pound for pound, however you want to do it, top 10 true heavyweights, they wouldn't belong in that group. Just one of those guys that borderline 15 ranked by one of the bodies. That's a guy he's going to go after first. And if he goes out there and dominates one of those type of guys, and then he moves himself up to fight a guy like Martin Bacoli or someone along those lines, I just don't feel like we're going to use Anthony Joshua as a guinea pig. His branding is too big. His name is too big. And I don't think Anthony Joshua is a standpoint of his career anymore where he's going to care about that standpoint. He only cares about making money, finishing out his career there. And if he maybe lucks into possibly getting a world title shot, then he does that. But I don't think Anthony Joshua's interested at all in it at this point of his career of rebuilding himself back up the proper way and getting himself in world title contention. His biggest thing is money. I don't necessarily blame him. He's going to be 35, 36 years old now in the near future. There's no point in him going that way again. I think he just wants to cash out. And at this point in time, I can't blame him for that. I don't think he's going to be a guy that could work his way back up anyways. And yes, the future is mostly Toma. That's straight up. I've talked about him many, many times. He is he's the best prospect in boxing. And I feel like that's the thing we're going to see. He is the next guy, and it's just a matter of time until that happens. Would I like to, as I said, as a boxing fan, would I like to see Toma versus AJ? Absolutely. That would be a fun fight. I feel like that's the fight to make. If AJ was to rebuild himself organically, that's how I would do it. With the way that AJ is at his tail end of his career, I don't see that happening. Unfortunately for Mosey Toma, most of the heavyweights are on their way out. AJ, yes, definitely. And that's a tough predicament. I actually had that whole breakdown. I think it was last week on Friday, maybe even Monday show. I talked about Toma and what his future outline is going to look like. And yes, that's 100% accurate. The heavyweight division is a very aging out division right now. It's going to be, when we look at what the heavyweight division is going to look like in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, it's going to be entirely different. Because even those guys that are fringe contenders, and I use that very loosely. I don't want to consider some of the guys I'm going to list right now as contenders, but let's just say guys that are ranked in the top 15 right now. You look at a guy in obviously Deontay Wilder. Look at a guy that I'm going to talk about very shortly. You have Michael Hunter in the mix. You have Kubrat Pulev. You've got those type of guys that are just in the mix. Obviously, Dillian White, Chisora, so on and so forth. There are so many guys in the heavyweight division that are in the next 3 to 5 years are not going to be boxing anymore. So those top 15 guys are going to look drastically different. And we're going to see an entirely new group. So for Itoma, he's in a very, very rough spot in that sense that you talked about there, where no, it's not a simple organic transition to heavyweight, but world champion. But here's the good news for him. He is 20 years old. He has got plenty of time to become that. He's already lost on the record for the Mike Tyson record. It is what it is. He's going to be a world champion in the future. It's just a matter of how and when. My personal prediction for that is we're going to see it spring, summertime of 2026. That's my personal thoughts on that. And I think the biggest thing for him is his easiest pathway is if Dubois defeats Usyk in July. If that happens, his gateway to becoming world champion could be easier. You could make the debate that if Usyk defeats Daniel Dubois and then has to relinquish his belts, that then obviously the belts open up and he will get an easier chance. But I feel like we could see a much higher chance of him fighting Daniel Dubois for world championship as opposed to Usyk. I feel like Usyk has his mindset. He wants this fight with Dubois, become undisputed, and then go out and fight a guy like AJ or Fury just to end up his career. So that's how I kind of see it happening. But yes, you're right. It's only a matter of time until he is world champion. Actually, I love him. Yes, I've watched him a few different times, highlights, but I watched his last fight. I absolutely love his. I think he needs to get busy as well. Jalov is obviously a very talented fighter. He is one of those guys. And that's what I'm excited for. I think I said 3 to 5 years. So many of these heavyweight guys in this past era is going to be gone with. And it's a whole new, fresh bunch of talent. And I'm very excited for that because I feel like there's a lot of guys I'm interested to see. There's a lot of guys that I'm not 100% sold on. But, obviously, guys like Richard Torres, Jared Anderson, those type of Jalov, all these different guys that are in the mix. Hypothetically, we don't know where they're at right now. They're young. They still have a lot of work to do. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Yes, I do agree with that. I think when you do look at all the heavyweights, Moses Toma is significantly far advanced than any of the heavyweights right now. Jared Anderson, give him props. He did obviously step up when he's really young, go and fight Bacoli early on, but still, Jared Anderson has so much work to do. I don't even know if he really loves the sport of boxing right now. He is a guy that is question marks and red flags all over himself. Does he have the natural God-gifted ability to do something at the heavyweight division? Sure, but he's got a lot of stuff to figure out right here. That's my biggest thing for Jared Anderson is he's got to get this figured out, but he's in that situation. Richard Torres Jr. is a guy that I feel like he's got this all right, but the rest of the God-given ability is not all there. You talk about some of these guys where the only guy that I feel like is that I could confidently say is going to be a champion at the heavyweight division, is going to dominate the heavyweight division, is Itoma. He is the only guy that I significantly do look at right now as that guy, and I don't really see anybody else that's going to be anywhere near him in that sense. There's a lot of guys I got question marks about that could be there, but in this next era, we will see that in the near future. All right, let's get into some other topics we're going to get into for today's show. Next up, I'm going to be outlining the 130-pound division of boxing. This is an interesting division. I talked about it, hinted at that I'm going to be breaking this down here momentarily when I was previewing Eduardo Nunez fight and recapping that fight. But listen here. I'm just going to read out some of the world champions right now. Lamont Roach, Oshaki Foster, Eduardo Nunez, Emilio Navarrete. Also, while it's not one of the main 4 belts, Kakashi is also hypothetically a world champion as well. Those are your guys that are 5 guys with the belts right now. All 5 of them are very talented. None of them have solidified themselves as that guy or are slipping up. In Navarrete's case, he has been that guy before. Obviously, very questionable as to if he's still that guy right now. But you have those 5 guys. Those are 5 solid champions, all with a lot of room to prove themselves. And I don't even know if Oshaki Foster or Lamont Roach will stay at the division. But hypothetically, for right now, they're at 130. Those 5 guys are very intriguing to me. And I think that we look at that. I'm excited to see possible unifications there. When we start to see some of these guys possibly emerge and see who's the top guy there, it gets really interesting. But here's where I've also been intrigued by the 130 division. You've got 2 guys that are young, rising guys that I believe have a chance of being world champion in the future. Those 2 guys are Ray Ford and Ryan Gardner. Ryan Gardner is going to be having a fight here coming up in July 19th, I believe. He'll also be on the show here in a couple of weeks as well to preview that fight. But those 2 guys, Ray Ford, I talked about him, I think that's going to be the real test for Eduardo Nunez. And the winner of that fight would probably give themselves a kind of a heads up and a little bit of an edge, I'd say, against the other guys at 130. But those 2 guys are guys that you're looking at. And then you also have solid contenders. Mark Magsayo, Robeson Conseil. Now, he is obviously not a great fighter, but he's still a solid guy in the mix there. Charlie Suarez, who deserves that rematch with Emmanuel Navarrete and better have that rematch. Masanori Rikiishi, obviously, he's another guy that we'll see how he returns. But 130 is an interesting division. Nowhere near the top of the overall boxing weight classes. They still have a long way to go in that aspect. But I feel like 130, now that we have 4 champions, obviously you could kind of hypothetically say Kakasi's at number 5. That is a solid weight class right now. It has a little bit more of a light at the end of the tunnel, especially if Lamont Roach and Oshaki Foster stay at 130 for a little bit. I feel like there's a lot of fights to have happen there. And also you throw in the other aspect. Stephen Fulton's most likely going up to 130 as well. If you add him into the mix, 130 does get very interesting. Because I feel like then you have a lot of bigger fights to make there. You could have a hypothetical fight. Ray Ford, if he beats, or if he doesn't beat, obviously, you go Eduardo Nunez, you could obviously have that fight, the winner of that fight, fighting guy Stephen Fulton. Fulton could also go out there and fight with Oshaki Foster. You could have him fight Lamont Roach. Lots of big fights to make. So my point here is at 130, I feel like there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like we're starting to have a little bit more clarity. Still a lot to determine, see who that top guy is, but there's starting to be a little bit light at the end of the tunnel where 130 is starting to become a much more appealing weight class, in my opinion. 2 more things before I wrap up the show. One of which is this. It came out. I'm not going to address it too much as breaking news that came out 2 hours ago. Don King has won the Pulev versus Michael Hunter bid. Don King, with a bid of $1.1 million, has won the purse bids to promote the WBA regular heavyweight title fight between Kubrat Pulev and Michael Hunter. The fight will take place on August 23rd at a site to be determined in the United States. The Pulev Hunter winner will be ordered to face the victor of the June 7th WBA interim title fight between Fabio Wardley and Justice Huni. Speaking of 2 of the guys that are young up-and-comers in the heavyweight division, there's 2 more of them right there. But interesting news. Not going to give my thoughts too much on that. Obviously, it is what it is. I don't think that either one of those guys would beat the winner of Hooney versus Fabio Wardley anyways. I feel like the winner of Wardley and Hooney would easily dethrone either one of those two guys, my personal opinion. But it is what it is. That's the fight. Don King's going to happen. August 23rd, there's going to be a heavyweight fight in the United States of America. That's all I'm going to say about that. Last thing I'm going to get into today's show is something that really baffles me. I have talked about Teofimo Lopez a lot. And the reason for that, not that I want to talk about him, not even that I really hate Teofimo Lopez. I don't really hate any fighter, to be honest with you. But he's made some dumb mistakes. Yesterday, I discussed his tweets. I discussed all those different things. And I said the fact of the matter is that, listen, he's only going to hurt himself. The way he runs his mouth with his racial things or whatever you want to do, all those different aspects, is going to reflect poorly on you. And then you're going to go after your boss and you're going to call him the dictator tweet. Not a smart thing, especially when you don't even want to back your tweet. As I said yesterday, if that's your thoughts on Turki Al-Sheikh, then post it and keep it. But the fact that you delete it right after just shows to me that that just doesn't make any sense to me. It baffles me about that situation. I feel like Teofimo Lopez, in my personal opinion, is a guy that is not okay right here. And the thing about boxers is that if your mind's not okay, you're going to be impacted in many other different areas. And so I don't know exactly what's going on with Teofimo Lopez. I think he's a great talent that does not have this always in check. And we've seen glimpses of that, obviously in the way he fights. But he's got to fix himself outside of that ring. He's only going to hurt himself. Whether you like Turki Al-Sheikh, you don't like Turki Al-Sheikh. Whether you like the way he promotes himself, you don't like it. He's hurting himself right now. And the reason I'm going to emphasize that is because of the news that came out a little bit ago. Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney was agreed to, but not signed yet, for August 16th. But now might not happen because of the tweet that Teofimo Lopez posted yesterday in that fight. Okay. Let me say this. I hinted this was going to be the case. I didn't know the Devin Haney fight was already agreed to between the two guys, but here's what I said. I said in my segment yesterday, when all this was going down, I said, Teofimo Lopez, you're going to say that you can't get any other fight available right now simply because you can't get Boots Ennis. That makes no sense to me. When you had other opportunities, because I said, we know this. Devin Haney's made it very clear that he wants to fight Teofimo Lopez. Whether you like that fight or not, Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez would still be a good sized fight. That's probably one of the biggest fights that Teofimo Lopez has been in now in a couple of years. It's a big fight. You can't deny that's still a big fight, attractive fight. So you had fights on the table, but because you didn't get the fight with Boots Ennis that you wanted, all of a sudden there's no fights available and you're going to go throw a fit about it. That makes no sense to me. And I'll say this again. For Boots Ennis, he has a mandatory. Boots Ennis does not want to fight that mandatory, and so if he does not get a unification, he wants to move to 154. And listen, whether you like what Boots Ennis wants to go do and the way he moves about that, that's on you. My personal opinion about Boots Ennis is this. He has a game plan, and whatever that game plan is, go and do it. For Teofimo Lopez, you had opportunities. One of those opportunities was Devin Haney. And so if you already agreed to a fight with Devin Haney, which would have been a good fight, at a catchweight set for 145, why not just take that fight? And that's why I just wonder this. What's wrong with him in the upstairs? Because you are going out there saying that you have no fights, you can't get a big fight, and no other good fighters want to go fight you right now. So you're just going to go retire, which you threatened to make your statement on yesterday. And now we come to find out that you had Devin Haney. My opinion on that, now maybe people would disagree, but Devin Haney would still be considered a big fight. Devin Haney would still be considered a top guy essentially at 147. He's been very disappointing, but relatively speaking, against everybody in the rankings at 147, he is still a relatively large name and a very, very talented, great fighter. My opinion, still is a top 15 type of fighter in boxing right now. If you're going to have that opportunity, you can't go around saying that nobody wants to fight you when you only mean your back in mind is Boots Ennis. So my thoughts on this. If you're Teofimo Lopez, you got to start fixing yourself. Either get off social media or watch your mouth. It's only going to hurt you. You don't know how to be the villain role very well. It's not a great situation for yourself. You have to stop just trash talking in the ways that you do it. Either learn how to be the villain role the appropriate way or go about business and just stop talking. It's only hurting yourself and it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you your legacy. And it's going to impact you drastically. So he's got to make a decision on what he wants to do moving forward. Because right now, he's only hurting himself and he's losing big fights. I'm going to go through the comments and I'm going to wrap up the show very shortly. Let's see what we got here. What happened to Wardley versus Miller? Miller had an injury. He had a pullout that got announced about a month ago, actually, now, after the press conference. And I think there actually was a lot of backstory behind that. I don't think it was just an injury in that situation because if we recall, he got fined a significant amount of money by the BBFC. And from the whole press conference situation, that kind of was a very debatable thing, in my opinion, to begin with. But after that, there was an injury in his camp, supposedly, and he had to pull out of the fight. And so what they had was Bobby Worley had to Jarrell Miller got replaced by Justice Hooney. There was a few different guys on the table there. They ended up going with Hooney. So it's going to be Justice Hooney from Australia fighting Fabio Worley on that card instead. As for other things, Tia wants too much attention. I agree. And here's the problem. Boxers in today's world, you go about the attention brand. I'm not against that. There's plenty of guys that go about and make themselves a big name, say things on interviews, do such and such things. That's fine. If you're going to trash talk your opponent that you want to fight, if you want to do the different things, sure. But the way that Tio does it is it just feels so extra. It just is not the right way. It doesn't make yourself in my opinion, I might be wrong. I've been told before that this is not something that people want, and if some people do support Teofimo Lopez in this. But I feel like there's a large percentage of people that have lost respect for Tio recently. And I believe that should be the case. And I think that if you're Teofimo Lopez, you have to reevaluate it. Why are you going down the liquor thing? Why are you posting different things? Why are you just trying to go down this other path and then do the thing? Like I said, if you think Turkey is a dictator and that's the way you believe, then leave the tweet up. Why are you deleting it right after? It just looks soft in my opinion. Who would any boxer want Devin? All right. Well, I'll be honest about that. I get it. I know some people don't want the Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez fight. Here's my personal opinion on that. What I will say about Devin Haney is I still do think he's a talented fighter. I bashed him. I made it very clear that his performance in the Times Square card was horrendous. I did not like it. It was disappointing. It was embarrassing, might I even add. But what I will go back to is at the end of the day, while he got whooped in that Ryan Garcia fight, don't get that twisted. In that fight, I will give him props for the fact that he did keep getting up. He made all 12 rounds, even though he got beat up bad. And at the end of the day, when you talk about the different guys, for Devin Haney, he showed in that moment that he does have toughness about him. I'm not about that. I'm not a big hater on Devin Haney. I do think he's a fine fighter, so I'm not going to go diss him on that aspect. But my personal thoughts on him is I do have to give him respect. He did get up. He kept getting up over and over again. That's not what a lot of fighters do, especially in this era. A lot of fighters in this era will not give up the way Devin Haney did. And I will give him props for that. He also has accomplished a lot in his career. And has he been very disappointing in some of his previous fights? Absolutely. I will be holding him accountable for that 100%. I do not like the way he fought in Times Square. I think that was horrible. I think a lot of his previous fights as well were embarrassing. Not good fights. But I'm not going to go out there and just call him straight up a track star all the time. He has to go redeem himself. Don't get that twisted. He must redeem himself. But in my opinion, Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez makes the most sense. When you look at possible catchweight fight at 145, 147, whatever you guys want to call it, that fight makes more sense than any other fight. The Ryan Garcia fight's off the table. A, because Ryan Garcia obviously is having hand surgeries now for a little while now. B, Ryan Garcia obviously does not deserve that fight either. And there's not a lot of fights available at the moment because of Pacquiao Barra is getting made, Brian Norman Sasaki is getting made, and then you have Boots Ennis who has to do a mandatory or unify or move to 154. The best fight to make for both those guys is to go fight at 145 against each other. And if you win the winner of that fight, granted it's a good performance, could possibly set themselves up to go fight a guy like Boots Ennis or world champion, become world champion. I just feel like that personally for me makes the most sense for both guys. I think that's the pathway they're going to go. How would that fight go? That's to be determined. I think that fight would actually end up becoming a lot better than people think it is. The reason I say that is that we have seen a track record that when Devin Haney steps up into bigger situations and moments, his ability to fight and the way he engages is a little bit better than other situations. And the very same story can be said about Teofimo Lopez. When the stakes are higher, he seems to rise to the occasion. If that were to occur, I feel like that'd be a much better fight than we are thinking it would be at this moment in time. Not guaranteeing it, but I hope that is the case, and I think that could be the case. Also for Teofimo at 140, not a lot of fights to make. The only other thing that would make more sense for Tio would be that if George Kambosos pulls off the upset against Hitchens on June 7th, I believe it is, June 14th actually, if he pulls that upset off, the rematch with Kambosos would make plenty of sense. I'm surprised he still has not done that rematch yet. I'm actually shocked that Tio's never wanted to go do the rematch with Kambosos yet. That would set up that perfect fight there. So I feel like those are the only opportunities for Tio when you look at the landscape of boxing, that if he were to go out and pursue a fight, the Tio versus Haney fight makes the most sense that's available on the table right now. And that's why I think that fight was agreed to. But as I said, no Devin Haney anywhere on TV. Listen, he's going to be on TV. He still is a top 15 type of guy. We'll see what ends up unfolding. But the last thing I'm going to say before we wrap up the show is that the one thing I'm concerned about and was a little bit skeptical on is why was the Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney fight scheduled for August 16th? If that were to be the case, it's the same day that's supposedly going to be rumored. It has not been official yet, but it is rumored to be the Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach rematch. And if that rematch is going to be happening the same exact time or day that Haney Tio's on, everybody knows it's going to be what fight people are going to be tuning into. So for them to do August 16th would be a little bit baffling to me. And obviously, I don't even know if that fight's going to be on the table anymore because of Tio's tweet. But I was a little bit shocked that that was even the date rumored there. When you have any other calendar date to go put that fight on, doing it on August 16th, the same day as Tank Lamont Roach rematch, would not be wise. Because if that is the case, then yes, I 100% agree with you, Jesus, that yes, if we're going to be honest, who would you rather watch, the rematch of Tank and Lamont Roach, or do the rematch with, or do the Haney Tio fight? Obviously, we're tuning into Tank and Lamont Roach too. But if that fight is on August, the next weekend, let's say, for example, that would be a fine fight. Obviously, you're tuning into that fight. Still would be a solid fight to make. Not a massive pay-per-view moving fight, but still, it is a good fight to have on. That being said, though, I appreciate you for tuning in to the show, Jesus. I'm always going to be on every day. The times do shift depending on who's going to be coming on the show. But I appreciate you for tuning in, man. It was great having you on here. You're always welcome on to say some comments. And I'll make sure to get back to this, as I said, after each segment. So appreciate you for coming on, man. God bless you guys. For everyone tuning in, too, thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. I will see you guys tomorrow. It's going to be a late night show tomorrow because I'm actually going to have on Charlie Suarez tomorrow night. So he's in the Philippines. It's going to be it's going to be 8 p.m. my time, Mountain Standard Time. Wherever you are, obviously, that could be a different time zone. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night. I'll also be having a basketball show on tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and the boxing show will be at 8 p.m. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. May God bless you guys all. Have a great rest of you guys' Wednesday. I will see you guys tomorrow. SchuZ out. God bless you guys.